in the dashboard that says start streaming.
Okay.
Just click start streaming.
There we go. Starting now.
There we go. I think.
Yes, we are live.
Yes.
Officially. Yay.
All right.
Cool. Well, so let's do all that again, shall we? Steve, you want to do a running montage of who we have here, and then I'll come in and do it.
Yeah, we're doing the resurrection after show. We got Paulogia, Godless Engineer. We were going to have Andrew Stradley's, but he didn't show. We got, quote, Supreme Master Apologist, who's now just Master Apologist. He stays his name literally.
Apologist Supreme.
I don't know what we're going to call him.
Remember, he's like a nacho.
Nacho Supreme.
Not so supreme
Exactly.
with
No. It's just Josh. We're talking to Josh.
Yeah, we got Nathaniel back in here. We got Atheist Hunter. We got Kyle. We got myself. We got Kane Five. We got Godless Engineer. I don't know who else is in here. We'll just announce them as they come in. But anyways, introduce yourselves.
Is the atheist hunter? He is in here.
He just popped in, literally. Yeah, like 4 seconds ago.
Cool. Well, I was just telling Paul that I hope he is a hugger, because I am a running start hugger, and I get to see him and all the rest of the good people at Faithless Forum next week. So, let me backtrack. Godless Engineer, introduce us again how only you can.
What's up, heathens? How y'all doing?
There we go. Now we're making progress. So I'm interested, just to start off before we get into the meat of the conversation. Atheist Hunter, what is that name all about?
Do you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Josh, you got to mute your wind mic there. You got so much background noise.
Yeah, if you're mute if you're not talking. But Atheist Hunter, what's this name all about?
I don't know. I took a randomly username.
Oh, maybe it's Hunter's mic.
It doesn't mean.
Yeah, I think it's Hunter's mic.
Okay.
Sorry, Josh.
It doesn't mean that you're out trying to hunt us atheists, right?
Maybe.
Cool.
Watch out.
Everybody's a person. Let's hope you're taking that metaphorically.
Well,
Sure.
I mean, if everyone's a person, then let's do most dangerous game.
I am already lost, and we have just now begun.
Barely begun.
So we're going to be talking about the resurrection, and we just had on that between Nathaniel and Dean, which I think went really well. But let's get two people that are on the atheist side at least. If you're not talking, can you mute? I'm hearing a lot of.
I muted him.
Yeah.
Okay. So two people on the atheist side anyway, and then we'll move to the theist side. But let's get Paulogia and Godless Engineers take on what they saw. Paul, do you want to start us off? How do you think it went, and what's your takeaway from it?
Sure, I can start us off. I mean, basically what we saw, I feel like even though both of them did a good job, what we saw was the basic Gary Habermas minimum facts argument laid out pretty much as we always hear it laid out. And then we heard, a lot of the common rebuttals. Nathan did a great job, and he picked up a lot of the newer sources, like the stuff that in hallucination research and a lot of the newer apologetics just against the minimum facts. But so it was basically what I expected until they kind of got heated at the end, which I kind of liked, because it was a little bit boring for someone like me who's been through this debate a lot of times. But I think it basically came down to the fact that the minimum facts were backed down to basically just that the disciples believed it. He basically conceded all of the ground other than disciples believed it. And, all religions are believed by somebody. So I'm not sure that really made the case.
Why are we okay with calling it the minimal facts argument? I see zero facts here. Can we all vote here today to change it to the zero facts argument?
Well, that's pretty much what it is.
I mean,
that's the minimum amount of facts it has.
But it's a minimum of facts in the same way if you were saying Harry Potter's real because Hogwarts is real and London is real and there are magic wands, so Harry Potter's real. It's pulling out elements from the story, and if you don't already believe the story, then they're not facts. They're just things that happen in the story.
Well, I agree, Paul. I think one of the biggest things that I saw was just that when he was saying that the logical conclusion is that there is a resurrection because of these facts, but those facts, that's not the logical conclusion because we've never seen anyone get resurrected or anyone raised from. We were talking about when we were talking about extraordinary claims earlier. We were having this conversation before the show.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that your mic? I don't know whose mic that is. I don't even see whose it is.
Somebody's chopping an onion or something.
I don't know who.
That's not me.
I think that was me turning pages. Sorry.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, it's not like pages turning, but I didn't see. You know, it's funny. I didn't see his light underneath it. So,
Apologist Supreme, you sounded like you had an issue with changing the name to the zero facts argument.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues. We can know a lot of things from history regarding the historical Jesus.
I'm waiting.
The empty tomb for first
Where's
of all,
the tomb?
The majority of scholars, New Testament scholars, hold to that, even though Gary Habermas.
No, they don't.
No. Okay.
Let's not gang up on him. Let's not gang up.
Yeah.
Godless, go ahead.
Okay, so you can't just say, oh, the scholars agree, therefore it's true. I mean, at one point in time, scientists agreed that germs weren't a thing. That doesn't mean that germs aren't true. So, I mean, just appealing to the authority without actually giving evidence to support what you're saying is a fallacy. But as far as like the minimal facts or whatnot, what it really is just the consensus view, like the consensus view on basic ideas about Jesus's life, I guess, being that supposedly he was crucified and he died from it. And then his followers afterwards saw, a risen Jesus. Like they build that kind of foundation and then they make the logical leap and say that, oh, that means that Jesus definitely was risen from the dead. And without any actual evidence to substantiate like a resurrection. And they say that that is more probable than the natural explanations that we have, which, if you don't know, miraculous explanations are always going to be far less probable than natural explanations.
That's David Hume again.
Where is
that's a 20?
Where's the tomb at?
So like this empty tomb, like this.
Where is it? Where's the tomb?
Well, they didn't venerate the tomb in the early church because the tomb was empty. The tomb wasn't the most important thing.
But where is it?
Wait, hang on. Wouldn't it have been
there is
Josh,
a tradition.
Josh, wait. Wouldn't it have been a holy spot though? You think? I think that this was a place that Jesus was buried for a couple of days and rose from the dead. I want to make this into a specific holy place. I would think that would be something very noted in history.
It's like this. Here's a comparison. It's like me saying that my God, the magical pink unicorn, came to Earth in a 1967 pink Volkswagen, right? And I'm saying that this is true because we can prove it because of the Volkswagen. And what's the first thing you're going to ask me? Well, where's the fucking Volkswagen at? Mm-hmm. It's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. I don't see how that's an intellectual argument against the empty tomb.
But Josh, you just appealed to Gary Habermas. Now, Gary Habermas allegedly has this. He has allegedly has this
Josh,
list
let him finish.
Come on. That we've never been able to see. And of course, we don't know who's on that list. He won't publish it. He can't tell us. So my challenge is constantly to theists. Show me one secular historian who says there was an empty tomb. There are none. Okay. There are no secular.
What about Pinchas Lapid, the late Jewish New Testament scholar, that said he remained a Jew, but he said on the basis of the evidence, he would believe in he believes in the resurrection of Jesus. He just didn't believe he was the Messiah. That's Jew. No,
then that's not a secular historian.
Oh, come on.
I'm talking about one secular.
What about Michael Grant?
Michael
Grant
Michael
is
Grant?
Another one. I got all types of quotes from historians, not just Christian
for an empty
New
tomb.
Testament historians.
For an empty tomb.
Hold on. Why do quotes from historians talking about what they think about the past
is
evidence for anything? Like, I don't see that as being actual evidence of an empty tomb. the best that you have is Paul in the New Testament. Like, that is the best evidence that you could hope for. And all he talked about was hallucinations that he had. That's it.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Paul doesn't talk about an empty tomb. Paul does not talk about an empty tomb.
He implies the empty tomb.
An implication is not an empty tomb.
Well, he doesn't mention the words empty tomb, but of course,
Okay,
Then you're thinking, so what? He doesn't. Yeah, like,
Josh, come on.
Minimal facts. How are these minimal facts?
That's not a good historical
It's all
argument.
speculation.
He didn't explicitly say it, but he kind of implied it in a roundabout way that I'm inferring into it by eisegesis.
Well, I don't think we have to spend much time on it. Let's just shoot it down, because you can't produce a tomb, so you can't say it's empty. Period.
In I believe it was 325. Helena.
Okay, Atheist Hunter, you got to stop blowing your mic. Hang on, so Jock. If you're not talking, mute your mic. Because I keep muting you, Atheist Hunter, and you keep on sounding like you're breathing into your mic, and it's very, very annoying. So I'm going to mute you. Stay muted. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry about that.
And I believe it was 325. Helena, she went back to Jerusalem and verified where the tomb was. And was talking and interviewing numerous people. We have every good reason to believe where the tomb is. We know where the tomb was.
Where?
It just wasn't a celebrated thing. The Holy Sepulchre.
How do we know?
Sepulchre. Excuse me. Well, yeah. Well, how do we know anything about history?
right. So the evidence we have. So my contention always is the most normal thing that happened when someone was crucified. We know this. The most normal thing that happened was they were thrown in a mass grave. There's nothing that you've just presented that lends itself one way or the other more than a mass grave, and we know that was the normal thing that happened.
Yeah, it certainly was the normal thing.
So why would we imply the abnormal thing?
You're not looking. You're looking at the general historical probability based on what normally occurred in under the Roman Empire. You're not looking at this specific.
And so Paul said
evidence.
buried. The earliest evidence we have, 1 Corinthians 15, which I don't know where we get this 2 or 3 years, but anyway, 1 Corinthians 15, earliest part, doesn't say buried in a tomb. It says buried. So why would we, if Paul didn't feel like he needed to make an exception that it was the abnormal thing, why would we not say that it was the normal thing? Like you're just reading into it what you want it to be.
So he, well,
yeah,
hold on.
guys. By the way, Atheist Hunter wants to speak. Atheist Hunter wants to speak. He's been talking in the group chat real quick. So just
yes, Atheist Hunter.
Okay, so one thing I have problems.
You might have to speak up just a little bit, Atheist Hunter. It's hard to hear you.
Okay, so one of the problems I have with some of the atheists.
Oh my God! Buy a wind. You got to get a wind filter, Atheist Hunter. Turn your head away from your mic because you need a pop filter, really, really bad. And you're just like, it's so horrible,
it's
man.
Popping, but it's okay. Go ahead, Atheist Hunter. Just talk loudly.
Wait, I can switch it. I can switch to my laptop instead.
Okay, yeah, try that.
I think he's on his phone.
And we'll get you back in here. The whole problem I have with this is we're calling this the minimal facts argument. Everybody's using the minimal facts argument. It is not a fact that the tomb was empty. That is not a fact.
It's not even a fact that he was crucified, because there's a lot of interesting just kind of contradictions with the crucifixion. For instance, there is, historically speaking, we don't have any precedent to say that there was a holiday in which or a tradition in which they released a prisoner. So that's one thing that's a problem with the whole scene at the whole trial of Jesus is kind of very weird. And also you have the fact that,
can I elaborate on that?
Sure.
Okay, so the scene where it's either Barabbas or Jesus is definitely a made-up tradition. It was made up as a replacement for the Yom Kippur ritual. If you guys don't know, the Yom Kippur ritual is where the Jews would take 2 lambs. One would be slaughtered to redeem the sins of the Jewish people, and then the other would be let go and carry the sins off into the wilderness. The sins of the Jewish people. And so when you have Jesus and this is according to the Gospels, Jesus Barabbas up there being as the offerings, and you have Jesus Barabbas, which Barabbas, if you don't know, actually means son of the Father. So you have two sons of the Father up there. One is let go because the crowd wants him to be let go because he's carrying the sins of Israel, being rebellion and murder and sedition. And then you have Jesus, who's the sacrificial lamb. He alludes throughout the entire New Testament that he is the sacrificial lamb. So that is the Yom Kippur ritual repackaged into the Jesus narrative. And so it goes back. A fabrication through and through.
Well, yeah, it goes back to the fact that the gospel writers, they wanted to have repetition. That was a key part of tradition back then. You see it a lot of times when they're like the whole thing when they're referring to Isaiah and talking about how there was a prophecy that Jesus would come around and therefore he's just like Elijah. And this whole thing of almost like a repetition in the Bible is a huge theme. And they wanted to, there's a specific thing. If Nathaniel is here at the moment, he's taking care of his dogs, but he would be able to explain it much better than I can. Let
me get Atheist Hunter in since he's back with a switch mic. Go ahead and say what you were wanting to say. Atheist Hunter. I just saw you typing. Hey, we can't hear you, Atheist Hunter.
No, I unmuted him.
Oh, unmuted.
Well, I don't think he's there.
I can see him typing. Hello, Atheist Hunter.
Hello.
There you go. Okay, yeah.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the problems I have with, especially, I'm not saying every atheist, but the majority, and that is most of them special pleading, especially the one who debated that Christian guy. All he said was, "Oh, the gospel contains contradictions. Oh, the gospels have unknown authors. Oh, gospels."
That was not all I said.
Okay. Pause real quick, buddy. Okay, pause. Okay, first of all, as far as the resurrection goes, I would like Atheist Hunter to tell me what Mark says about how this empty tomb was found.
How?
What? Tell me the story in Mark.
You can tell me.
Why can't you tell me?
Because I don't remember.
Okay. Let me give you a rundown of the four gospels. Okay, Mark has I believe it's three women, including Mary Magdalene, Mary, mother of James and Joseph, and then Salome. They find the tomb and there's a boy inside of it, and they tell them, "Oh, hey, Jesus is risen. Go, flee." And they left and they didn't tell anybody. Now then Matthew comes in, and boy, Matthew has an angel descending from heaven, striking the tombstone or the cover stone away from the tomb right in front of the women. And then he plops his butt right down on top of the tomb and proclaims Jesus is risen and tells the women to go off and whatever. And then the story continues.
I got an answer.
Okay, so
hold on. I said, let me give you a rundown of all four gospels. I've only gotten through two of them. Okay. Number 3, two women get to the tomb, and two angels appear to them and tell them about Jesus. Okay, and then in John, one woman, Mary Magdalene, gets to the tomb and just finds some tattered robes on the ground or whatever, his clothes that he was buried in, and then that's it. There was no angel appearance at all. So tell me, how is this 4 different perspectives of the same event?
Can I tell you?
Do you
Blown the fuck out.
Do you even know what an angel is? Like, please, no. Tell me what an angel is.
No. Oh no.
Oh, Atheist Hunter, you really? Come on.
Instead of picking on somebody,
no. I'm serious. Tell me what an angel is. Tell me.
Oh. Well, I met one in college a few years ago when I was back in the day.
Yeah, right here. You have one in stream with you.
Send me an angel.
An
No,
angel
oh
is
my
a
God.
is a human being. It looks like a human being. They're like, give me a
How do you
scholars.
know?
No, stop. Give me a scholars who says that an angel has wings.
I didn't say anything about wings.
What are you talking? What does that have to do with what does that have to do with what we're talking about, though?
Yeah.
Because the angels looks like a human being.
In Mark,
I don't
Mark
care
says
what
that-
they look like. One flew from heaven and sat on top of the covernstone.
In Mark,
Atheist
it has the
Hunter, you
running
came
of
in
the-
here
of
and
a
said
man
that
in white.
you said that
So in Mark, it
Nathaniel's
does have
argument.
that.
It doesn't matter. Atheist Hunter came in here and said that Nathaniel's argument rested on contradictions of the Bible. He said one sentence about that, and I know he's here now.
I never
He said
said
exactly.
that.
He said exactly one sentence about contradictions, and all he said was he just repeated Gary Habermas. Well, it depends on which gospel you read, and that was my problem with Dean. Dean during this debate kept trying to accuse Nathaniel of resting his case on contradictions when he said one sentence about it. None of it was resting on contradictions. So you obviously didn't listen to the debate very closely.
I never said it was only contradiction. I said there are other things that he said that was special pleading. For example,
You did a
okay.
weird.
Give us another
impersonation of him,
example.
so I
Yeah,
assume-
what do you mean by special pleading, please? Because I this fallacy has come up numerous times, and I think a lot of
because
people.
he
So what do you mean?
doesn't apply
I
the
can
same
give you-
criterion to other historical documents. That's the problem with some of the atheists because they believe the Gospels are fairy tales. It is actually Greco-Roman biographies.
Well, it's
They're not
fairy
biographies,
tale.
actually. They're
Yes, there
theological.
are.
Craig
No.
Keener
No,
says
they're not.
otherwise, GE. If you've read Craig Keener, he says otherwise.
Atheist Hunter, move away from your mic. Is it really that hard? You're breathing right into your mic. Do you not notice it?
One of you keeps asking about
And I don't think it's
metaphysical
special
beings,
pleading.
and the other one keeps throwing out names
Craig Keener.
as examples that's supposed to refute the points that's being brought up. Well, what we're trying to get to, the point that we're trying to get to here on this issue is, where is the tomb?
Why do you need to know? That is argument.
Because you're using it as a fact.
So
to-
we have to locate. Okay, where
Yes,
was,
if you're going to say that the tomb was empty,
where did
you do need to locate it. Absolutely.
Where
think it
did
would help,
Jesus
yeah.
die?
of the Rubicon? In what location was the crossing of the Rubicon? Where did it
I know
occur?
the fucking answer to that.
There you go.
ahead.
I read the
Go
book
ahead.
Rubicon yesterday.
All right. They don't know.
I know we know
they don't know the
exactly where
exact
it is.
spot.
Yes.
It's very well documented by
Okay.
multiple people.
Yeah, it was January 10th of 49. We know exactly where it was.
Oh. We could
don't know
play
exactly
what
where
aboutism
it
all
was.
day long. The point is,
Kyle.
if you're
Yeah,
going
if
to
it-
look, if you're going to say this, if you're going to say that one of the arguments or one of the things that I'm going to put forth as an example or as evidence for the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, if you're going to say that the tomb is empty and you're going to use that as a fact, you absolutely would need to know where that tomb is, just so that you could know, number one, it was empty, and number two, that it was even used in the first place.
But maybe it wasn't the most important thing. That's why
It's
its
pretty important.
importance was less. Well, no, hold on. If Jesus was indeed resurrected, it would have drastically less importance than the very fact that he appeared. So the appearances are emphasized way
For real.
more in the Gospels and in the 1 Corinthians 15 creed.
I don't think you're real.
Josh, let me. Okay, I think you have a disproportion thing going on here. Look at if we never did find out, I'm going to take Nathaniel's word for it that we know where that Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Fine, I'll accept that. We believe that he did, right? We believe that he, doing his where he was going on Pompeii, or I don't remember the story of the Rubicon. He was going on Pompeii, wasn't he? Okay.
Yeah, he was going, and he fucked
Okay.
Pompeii up too.
Okay, I like I said, history is not my thing, but we know that was a historical event. There's no scholar, I think, that denies that historical accuracy.
We know the crucifixion too.
Let me finish. So where he actually crossed, to me, is just a minor detail of, hey, we like to find this out. We know what happened. Here, let's find out. He had to go somewhere, so he crossed here. Okay, but you're arguing that's the same equivalency of the crucifixion, and that there was a empty tomb there. If there was an empty tomb, I think that would be more than that.
No.
It wouldn't be more than enough evidence, but it would certainly be substantial evidence. They say we need to have a location where we believe this happened. They don't even have that. That wouldn't prove anything one way or another because it's an empty tomb. But if it
With
had scorched,
Helena, we do have it.
if it had scorch marks in it, if there was like, this, if we found something like the Shroud of Turin burned in the ceiling,
carved into the side,
something like that
The
may lend a little
tomb
bit of
of the Holy
credence to it.
Sepulchre.
But there wasn't even
That's
that.
actually not. We don't have any proof that was the actual tomb.
No,
you have to
you don't have
realize
any
that.
proof of anything from history. You do it on
Oh my God!
plausibilities.
Look, Josh. Here's my thing about you. Your historiography is very limited. You rely on secondary sources when we're talking about a lot of different things with primary sources. You need to find the primary sources and find multiple of them in order to.
Majority of New Testament historians do not.
We don't
agree
care about
with
New
what you
Testament
are
historians
saying.
because we don't believe the New Testament.
Right. Show me
Well, you don't have
Golgotha.
to
Show me where
believe-
Golgotha
you
is.
don't-
Where's
you don't-
where's Golgotha?
Let me correct something. You don't have to believe that New Testament is inspired to think that some things in the New Testament are
Some
historically
things, the
credible.
things that are attested, but the empty tomb is not one of those attested things.
But
There's no
because it wasn't
attestation
The
focused.
whole
outside
point
of
is
that.
that we
It
have
wasn't
multiple
focused.
sources for the things that are attested in the New Testament. We have multiple sources that say
the point-
multiple things that are
The
confirmed.
point is, it wasn't important because they couldn't show the body.
Okay, so you're
Of
appealing
course
to it's
they
not.
would.
Okay, so it's not important. So therefore, just concede that you don't have evidence for it. Just concede that, because if your appeal now is that it's not important, then you obviously don't have stuff to present.
No, it's not as important as the appearances. It's because of the appearances. Because
Okay, but
of the
then we can
physical.
drop empty tomb as an empty fact. As a
No,
fact,
it's
just
because
Gary
of the
Habermas
physical
has dropped
nature.
it. Why are you still using it?
N.T. Wright in his book, The Resurrection of the Son of God,
Oh,
says
God.
both the empty tomb and the appearances are both necessary and sufficient conditions to show that the resurrection is
Yeah, but we.
probable. as
Okay.
This
a
is what we're
historical
telling you.
event.
The
Hold
new-
on.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Okay, so Supreme Apologist, what is your actual
Supreme.
evidence for an empty tomb? And let's take a look at that, shall we? Because I hear you rattling off like a bunch of scholars and whatnot. And that's fine
I
and
read.
dandy. Huh?
I read.
But not the right stuff.
You read?
Well, do y'all read Craig Keener or anybody like
God.
that?
Yeah.
It does-
Does he say that the tomb is a
But do
thing?
y'all read
The
Richard
tomb is a
Carey?
thing? I bet he does.
What
Confirmation bias.
is? I just want to know what the actual evidence is.
We have
well,
independent
it's a-
sources.
Let me answer. Atheist Hunter. I believe the actual evidence is in 1 Corinthians 15, where a
Oh.
Jew would never have talked like that or said that. And he.
How do you know
appeared-
that?
Do you have another source of Jewish people not talking like that? Where's your other Jewish
Do you-
sources that
Do you want
talk
me?
in a similar-
I can give you quotes. I have to find it to show that when a Jew talked
Well, then do
about,
it. Do it.
all right.
Hold on.
Quotes
Let
isn't
me-
proof though,
let me
and I want
try.
something outside of the Bible. Like, stop using the Bible to.
Okay, Kyle, you gotta
Yes.
stop. Okay, so if you're telling us that we cannot, that we need to use extra biblical sources, then we need to deny Josephus as reliable. That's what you're saying. You're telling us.
No, listen, Atheist
That's
Hunter.
what you're saying.
Let me stop you there, Atheist Hunter. Let me stop you there. Number one, I don't need to stop. Number two, you need to stop. You need to stop spouting off that you have these proofs that you don't have, because
Okay,
when, because when push
Atheist
comes to
Hunter.
shove, when you're saying that there is that one of your proofs is an empty tomb, that sounds like you have tangible evidence that you can prove that number one, that there was a tomb, number two, that it was empty. You can do neither. So how are you going to tell me to stop telling you not to use a source that you're getting this from in the first place, when all I'm asking for is for you to give me some sort of general idea as to where this empty tomb is that you keep putting forth as proof? It's
Okay,
very
Kyle.
simple.
Weren't you sound exactly like the person that was in the Trevor Valley debate on here like a while ago? Or were you the Christians Against Dinosaur person as well? Just out of curiosity.
No, I've never been on a debate. No.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, you just sound similar. Never mind. Disregard that.
So could I respond to Kyle?
I'm ready to give evidence for the empty tomb.
If you have something
no.
outside of the Bible, yes.
No.
Oh, come
Okay,
on.
so Okay, so why do I need to have all extra biblical sources when we don't need, extra Josephus sources? Tell me why.
Do you not
We
understand?
do though. People have criticized the fact that we use Josephus as a source.
The question that you're
Always.
asking there? Do you not understand how it sounds when you say, how can you expect me to present evidence that's outside of the very thing where I'm deriving this from? You're using the Bible to justify the Bible. Do you not see do you not see
That's bad
No,
argument.
that's not true.
it is true.
We're not saying that the Bible is inspired. We are using it as any
As
other
historical
historian would do.
No, you're not, because you're not.
Yes,
A
we
historian would realize you need these extra biblical sources to cross-examine. You don't just use one source from one side of the argument. You need to find
the
other
Bible is
sources
not.
and look
we're
at
not
it from different
using it
angles.
like
This is
that.
what historiography is.
Okay, guys,
The
guys,
First Corinthians
let's calm
15
down.
creed is one
Sorry,
source.
sorry
the
about that.
Gospel
I'm
of
just getting
Mark is
passionate.
one source, and
This is bizarre.
the narrative, the pre-Gospel Mark that Mark used for his source material, that's a third source. Now, there's
No.
stuff in
No.
there's
No.
stuff in
No.
Luke and Matthew.
Do you have
that's
that
not in
source?
Luke.
Do you have primary sources? We're talking about sources that come, like if Jesus, we have, like for instance, with Muhammad, we have sources. We know he existed because he wrote down all this stuff, and we can
Do we
criticize
have
So
that.
you
primary
deny
source from
Jesus
Josephus?
existed now. You deny Jesus existed?
He's also gay because of J.K. Rowling.
Muhammad's
he's
gay?
because of that little romp in the Garden of Gethsemane before.
Can't
Did y'all
fight.
say Muhammad's gay?
No.
What?
Oh.
No, he's a
Can't
pedophile.
fight.
No, that was a
Can't
side.
fight.
Okay,
that was a
no,
side
we're not
point.
talking about Muhammad.
Can't fight.
I mean, I
Can
don't
ask
even know
you
why
a
I'm bringing it
question?
up.
Yeah, that was a little
Can't
joke,
fight.
but
Sure. Ask me a question.
Okay, so can we rely on Josephus because he does not use he's not contemporary source. He's actually secular source, and he's the only
So
source.
Josephus
Sure.
is an interesting argument just because there actually has been some scholarly arguments about whether or not Josephus is a worthy source, just because of
Well,
Let's
the
Can I-
problem is it's all we have, because all we have is a lot of Jewish sources, and it's hard to try to get like other sources from it.
I know
Godless
GE
has been very popular.
I know GE can explain why it shouldn't be, but GE, just for a second, before you jump into why he's not, let's just play right now. Let's just play and grant them that Josephus is a credible source. How does that advance us to an empty tomb? What did Josephus say about the tomb?
Because it doesn't do anything. I'm just showing that you're
Okay.
special pleading.
it's a
That's it.
cumulative case.
No, it's
I
not
think.
special pleading because in general
it is.
we agree. There's a lot of history is based on really crummy evidence. We don't
Come on.
we don't reduce our standard of what we accept just because that's the only thing we have. We apportion our confidence based on the evidence that we have. You guys are super confident about this empty tomb, and yet we have next to nothing. You can maybe
What
say,
about
we have
the
a little
women?
bit of-
What about the women
What
discovering
about
the
the
empty
women?
tomb?
Oh my
Doesn't that show by
God!
the criteria?
It's the
right.
reversal of
It's
expectations motif. Hold on, it's the reversal
That's
of expectations
that meets the
motif.
criteria.
Mark
Hold on,
opens
you're-
up.
hold
Hold on,
GE,
Mark opens
one
up
second,
his
GE,
gospel.
GE, you're reading from Richard Carrier. That's where your source is coming from.
What?
No, this is basic
lost your mind?
scholarship.
Go
Reversal
ahead.
of expectations is a basic thing. Also, the criterion of embarrassment
bad
for the
source.
women finding the tomb is horseshit, because criterion of embarrassment doesn't prove anything.
What about
It
considering
doesn't.
the low status of women?
No one outside of New
No.
Testament history uses it. No historian other than New Testament brings it up. Like
Actually, a good
criteria
evidence.
of embarrassment is not.
Yeah, it's really not that good of an argument. I
Was
mean,
it
even
really
I
not
got
outside
it.
the Bible?
Here's
It's
Were
not
they
a good
outside the
example
Bible?
why.
Or are you getting this from the Bible again?
Well,
Well, no, that's
look
not-
what
From the Bible?
Josephus says about women.
Got it.
In his Antiquities of the Jews, 4:8, I believe it's verse 15, not verse, but 15. This is what he said, and this is a quote. But let not the testimony of women be admitted on account of the levity and boldness of their sex, nor let servants be admitted to give testimony on account of their ignobility of their soul. I could go on and
What does that
on.
have to do with
Okay, hold on.
They're not
Hold on,
possible in the
He was
ancient world.
sexist. Everyone was.
Hold on. I've got to get my son to bed real quick, but I want to add this. Okay, so there is a really great case for how the Bible has changed because of actual embarrassing information. For instance, like the women finding the tomb at the end. Mark was very Pauline in nature, and so he didn't have a problem with women finding the tomb. For one thing, the women that found the tomb were very important to the story in general.
It's in all four
They weren't just,
Gospels.
hold on, damn, dude, do you know how to have a conversation?
All right.
So he had no problems with the women finding the tomb. And we know this because in the 2nd century, they actually changed the ending of Mark because it was embarrassing, because the embarrassing thing was that there was no post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. So they had way more than one chance to change the fact that women found it if it was embarrassing. We know that they did change things that were embarrassing, like, for instance, the fact that the women ran away and told nobody. And then in all subsequent Gospels, they ran away and they told people about it.
It implies in verse 8
come back
that,
and verify what was being told by the women. So these are actual embarrassing things that were changed in the Bible, and the only way that you can know that is by comparing the differences in the progression of how the Bible was written, being that Mark was written first, then Matthew, then Luke, and then John.
Let me ask you this. Why in 1 Corinthians 15, why are women not reported as the discoverers of the empty
because Josh, that one
or even mentioned, excuse me,
because that we're talking about legends developing. This meets exactly with the legends developing. The earliest sources don't have them. Later sources do have them.
Why don't you trust the 1 Corinthians 15?
Why
would if the Gospels are
Paul never met Jesus?
Hold on, let me make the argument. If the Gospels were later developments from the 1 Corinthians 15 passage, which I think we all agree, then why in the heck do they include women?
Well, so let me ask you this, Josh.
It wouldn't help their argument.
Kane, don't hold on.
Josh, I'm sorry.
Josh, who does Josephus say normally tended to the women or tended to the bodies? It's women. Women, that was a woman's job. There were no men went and tended to bodies.
Gospels are historically accurate.
I'm saying that's a tradition that would have been known. Why would if that tradition was known, it would have been super weird to have had male apostles.
Their case. That would undermine their case.
The quote you brought up was purely in terms of court testimonies. Women were key, as you know, in converting people to Christianity. People didn't care about the gender of the people that they were learning these Jesus stories from. In that early church community, women were on, and I think you would agree, on quite equal status. So the fact that in some court somewhere that their testimony wouldn't have held sway, obviously it held sway in the local communities where these converts were happening. So this whole criterion of embarrassment thing is ridiculous, because it needed to be that it would have been completely wrong to the tradition if men had found them first. The criterion of embarrassment is only used by New Testament scholarships. No other historians use it.
I think that is a really bad argument.
Why is that a bad argument?
Because it's a great argument.
I don't see why they would include it in the later traditions.
Let's just go ahead and get past something, because this is just the first of the minimal factual.
I'm trying to understand
real quick. Here's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand this. I'm trying to understand, Josh, how the mental gymnastics that you're having to go through to explain the fact that you don't have a tomb to account for. I mean, we started off in one direction, and now we're ending up talking about what Josephus said about women at some point. It has nothing directly to do with the fact that you don't have a tomb to put forward. So can we please move on by you saying here that you're right? It cannot be conclusively proven that there is an empty tomb.
Good luck with that.
Yes, it cannot be 100% proven that there was an empty tomb.
Thank you. Okay. Perfect.
But we can't prove anything in history. We have to do on the plausibilities.
No.
By the way,
What are you
I wanna
talking
get
about?
this out.
What are you? No,
Secular-
hold on, stop. You can't just say that and us move on. What do you mean by you can't prove anything by history?
Well, because it's not like mathematics. You can't have a mathematical proof in historical studies.
History
That's
is about
common sense.
probability, not
No, it's
proof.
not.
Do you,
Wait, are you
do you understand what you're saying right now? Like,
Our whole
Here,
point
here,
is that
Not proof. History is about
Well-
probability. Like how? Oh,
how
We have
probable is it that 9/11 happened? How probable is that? What's the probability of that?
well, it's probable. It is probable that it happened because we have evidence, videos and such.
Right. Correct.
There were no videos
So
back then.
history can be proven.
Not proof. It's not proof. It's not
Are you-
proof.
Are you really
Are you-
saying history can
is this
be
like the last
100% proven?
Thursdayism argument?
Okay.
Yes,
gotta
yes,
be.
I am saying that.
Can we get Dr. Josh here?
Yes,
Yeah,
I am
Kyle-
saying.
Kyle,
that
actually,
history can be
I would have
proven.
to almost agree with our theist friends on this one. That
Thank
in general, theists or not theists, in general, historians, and especially the further back you go, they don't ever claim that you can prove anything.
Yeah,
It's
I would
all
agree with that too.
It's
Maybe-
all based on
okay,
we have a
probability.
high degree
Look,
of-
I wanted to
maybe
read-
that's true in a 100% probability. I'm just saying that it's ridiculous to say that you cannot prove historical events happened. Like, are we
have a high degree of
Are we that far removed from where
Hey,
we're trying to
Nathaniel.
nail down here? You absolutely
Nathaniel, I see that you have a lot of books, Nathaniel. That's
Yes.
pretty impressive. I do too, and I
No.
also
It's an example. This is the example, okay? These are some of the books that I used for
That's great.
the debate, okay? Along with a lot of
Can,
apologies.
can you tell me the titles?
Yeah, if you want them, but hold on. Jesus fucking Christ, you are really bad at conversation. I'm using these as an example because there are apologetics books in here. I have Lee fucking Strobel, okay? That's the worst.
Do you have
I
Lee
wouldn't
Strobel?
count that.
Yeah.
Held it up.
Do you
Okay.
do you have? Let me ask you a
I
question.
have
Do
Lee
you
Strobel.
have?
I have Josh McDowell.
You have Richard Carrier.
Yes, I have Richard Carey, but hold
How
on.
many books?
The fact that I'm giving you apologists first, you numb fucking idiot.
Hey, let's
All right,
be respectful.
here's what I'm doing. No, Jesus Christ, I will not respect you when you keep interrupting me. I was very nice to my friend. You are not my friend, and I have no obligation to be nice to you.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't
You know-
interrupt. I'll stop.
But these are, okay? I have a high degree of certainty based on these historical accounts that I
What?
do not accept that the resurrection is historical.
They are not scholars.
Yes, they are. He's using a synthesis of all the scholars he has read. That's the whole point. That's the
Is
whole
he-
point of history. Is
Is Lee
synthesize.
Strobel a scholar?
Art Ehrman is a fucking New Testament historian.
Aaron is.
Find
Oh,
me-
okay, Bart Ehrman. I
Okay.
accept that.
Shimon Gibson. Fucking Crossan.
I'm so glad I have so little
Charles
interest in this
Freeman.
topic because I would never be able to read all that, Nathaniel. I really would. I like reading. Don't get me wrong. I got to admit, I'm probably bored reading those types of books, but I'm glad that you do. Trust me. I'm glad we have somebody that is well read on this because I couldn't do it. But
I
that's
read a lot.
impressive. I
What's the
think
next-
that's really amazing.
Steve, what's the next argument in the minimal facts argument?
There's the
Okay, can we one
Paul was
thing?
converted on his road to Damascus. That
Well,
there's
everyone uses a different flavor, but Dean was using the disciples. The disciples had experiences that they claimed was resurrection experiences.
Yeah,
I
the
think
appearances.
Nathaniel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, I wanted to talk to you about just an interesting argument, just about you were talking about something really cool with the fact that like hallucinations and stuff like that, and the fact that they may have have mental illness. There was an account of Paul I read. I forget exactly where this was, where Paul was said to walk with a limp, and then of course in his account you have the fact that he was temporarily blind. So there is some evidence to say he was probably suffering from something. Either we don't know if he was on a horse or anything and
Right.
fell
But
off.
That's
but-
actually a step too far. Like most of the hallucination events that we are aware of today in a study, they're not people with histories of mental illness.
Correct.
People without mental illness have hallucinations all the time.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that.
But I don't see the need to inflame the thing saying that Paul was mentally ill. Like, I just don't think that helps.
I think I wasn't trying to make that argument. I was trying to say that Paul might have suffered from a stroke or something like that, where he had some condition or epilepsy. That's where we're getting.
Can I ask y'all who is using? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pass. I forgot what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
probably for the best.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, I think it's actually more likely that Paul was just schizotypal, meaning that he's not necessarily schizophrenic or anything, but he's just prone to hallucinations for whatever reason. And this is actually, this is supported by the fact that, as Paul recalls, the only people that were considered apostles were those that received a vision of Jesus, meaning other schizotypals. And recent studies have shown how schizotypals are actually drawn to cult-like mentality because they're more likely to be welcomed in that, and their visions or whatnot are actually more likely to be accepted rather than pushed to the fringe of society. So there's actually a very good naturalistic case for Paul being schizotypal. But in either case, if you don't want to put like a word on it or anything, it's very clear that Paul was suffering from some kind of hallucination, considering that his only sources. Hold on. I want to hear what you had to say, Apologist Supreme, but let me finish. Paul's only two sources are visions and scripture. Mark, he only cites scripture as his actual source for any of the information that he gets. So
that is not true. That is about theology.
No, it's directly in their works.
That is about theology.
I'm sorry. He did have. Didn't he have some contact with Peter? Is that correct, or am I getting it?
Well, yes. Okay. So to answer Confite, he did have contact with Peter,
two different times
or whatnot.
Hold on. James, and John.
Hold on, guys.
I've got to shut up. Just please shut up when somebody's talking.
Atheist Honey, you gotta stop interrupting people. First of all, your mic sucks.
Like, I'm getting angry,
and you're breathing into it, and then you're just interrupting somebody every time they're trying to explain.
My biggest pet peeve is when somebody interrupt. Like, I hate that. And if the next person to do it, you're getting kicked the fuck out. Let him finish his thought, and then we'll let you finish. But if you interrupt him again, you're gone. Period. I'm not putting up with it. Go, G.
So Paul does end up going to, I believe it's Jerusalem, and he meets up with Cephas and some of the other apostles. Now, he goes there, and he only confirms the existing theology that he's teaching. He does not get any new information about his theology because he's meeting with other apostles that have had visions of Jesus. Okay. And so he just confirms his already established theology. And that's all that he does. He doesn't get new information.
I was also under the impression that Peter was very much in conflict with Paul's theocracy, and kind of Peter was more of a fundamentalist, more about fundamentalist Judaism, and more about than Paul was more about the diaspora. Nathan, I see you.
I feel like that's more of them inferring like from Jesus and what he meant, rather than the actual gospel of Jesus, like that basic gospel that you have like in 1 Corinthians 15. He went there and confirmed like that part of the theology, if I'm not mistaken. Like, he didn't confirm the differences they had or whatnot, which I'm not all that keen on. But what I do know is that in the Bible, what Paul recounts is that he went to Jerusalem and confirmed his gospel that he was teaching with the other apostles.
Yeah. Now, one of you two can go.
He went there in I believe it was 49 AD to confirm, and Peter and James and John, when he went back a second time, confirmed what he was teaching was true. Now, he put the three visionary experiences. That's probably where you're saying that that Paul had a mental illness or was schizophrenic or what have you. It's because of those three things in the book of Acts, which record him seeing a vision or hearing something. But all those three occurrences have extra mental activity. So he's in the 1 Corinthians 15 creed, he's putting his appearance of Jesus, the appearance of Jesus to him, and trying to put it on, trying to show that he's a real apostle, that Jesus appeared to him. And he said, he appeared last to me. So he's not saying that the appearances were of the same type, but he's trying to get his appearances to him up the status up to the other apostles.
I'm glad you agree.
That's correct.
I'm glad you agree that Paul really saw visions. I mean, if you go, and I don't know why
extra mental though.
Hold on, and I don't know why you value Acts ahead of Paul's own words, because Acts is, as far as a lot of us observe, Acts is very desperately trying to say that Peter and Paul were on the same page, where Galatians 2, Paul is very clear that he and Peter were not on the same page. But in 2 Corinthians 12, for example, Paul says twice, pardon me, I'm going from memory here, whether it was in the body or out of, I was caught up into the third heaven, and whether it was in the body or out of the body, I did not know. He says that twice. He describes his own experience of Jesus as not knowing whether it was in the body or out of the body. So you cannot say, and obviously we can't prove that it was a vision, but you have to at least say that it's inconclusive and that Paul's own words describes them as visions. He never describes it as a physical experience. Now the Acts descriptions of Paul's vision on the Damascus Road, despite the fact that the three of them just don't corroborate with each other very well at all, those would be secondary sources to what Paul says in his own words. And even those, even I know you say that there was things like light or whatever, but for those of us who believe that these are legends, these sound like legendary development of Paul's Damascus Road experience.
Exactly. Like Acts is heavily just mythicized just in general, because Luke has it's a very clandestine view of the early church. Like for instance, Peter, he says that Peter like converts all of Jerusalem. And we of course know for a fact that didn't really actually happen. It was more like, and there was a lot of all the arguments going on in the early church that we know about because we have other writings. We know that there was arguments about whether the Gnostics were right or whether the church in Jerusalem was right. And there was all other kinds of ideas floating around. And Acts kind of glazes over that to try to make a more perfect narrative.
The Gnostics are way later than Acts and the other New Testament documents. You must know that.
Well, I have a question based on that. Then you would agree. You can, hopefully you can hear me pretty well, but you would agree that that the writer of the book of Luke also wrote the book of Acts.
Yes.
Okay. And then my question then to that is, why would the writer in this is simply for me having to do with continuity. Why would the writer of the book of Luke say that Jesus hung out with them basically as a ghost? But I know there was a physical thing too, but the guy was appearing back and forth like Casper, let's be honest, for one day. And then in the book of Acts, it says for 40 days.
Oh, the Gospel of Luke? Well, hold on. You're saying in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is a ghost?
Did you listen to anything else? I swear to God, it's like I didn't say anything else. I specifically said he was like a ghost because he was appearing back and forth and walking through walls and shit. He also did the physical thing, yes.
Okay, well, in the Gospel of Luke, it speaks way more of the physicality of Jesus than any other gospel.
Oh, poor Nathaniel.
That wasn't my question.
I'm literally at the end of my rope. Literally.
Well, if Jesus was resurrected, sure, he could do things like walk through doors and appear in different places. I don't see how that's a big leap if indeed he was resurrected.
No, yeah, but that's not the question I asked you. Although because I can say with great certainty that with the the type of wording and the dictum that Paul used, that he certainly did not accept a fleshly resurrection, but that's maybe for a different time. But
we can discuss
the book of Luke says that Jesus hung out with the disciples for a night, and then he walked out and did a, and then the book of Acts, which is written by the exact same person, and you agree with that, says he was there for 40 days.
Oh, I see. I see. Yes, I see what you mean. Mike Lacona discusses this. It's called time compression. Time compression. That Luke shows that
they got close to a black hole or something.
It's in
Why is that funny?
God. How deep are we going here? Holy crap.
Look at the links we'll go. Look at the
Holy
links.
crap. Time compression. Okay.
That has been accepted by majority
Hold on.
scholars.
Let's hear it out.
Okay. Let me finish. Time compression, where Luke tries to hurry up all the events and put them in one place, Jerusalem, and in a very narrow amount of time. But then in the Gospel of Acts, it's over, many days, many weeks. So a common sense interpretation of the facts would say this is just a literary device, time compression, rather than seeing it in a strictly wooden literal fashion. I think we should, be generous and look at it in a common sense way.
I'm being very generous right now, and I'm going to tell you this. We look at it common sense, and we read that it says 1 day and 40 days. That's common sense.
Yeah, that's about the same author.
Something none of us have ever considered was something called time compression.
You're saying Luke contradicted himself, but he wrote the second book. If he did, probably within a year after he wrote the first.
We're saying
book.
it's all full of shit.
Surely he would know that.
Well, yes, and
what we're saying is that it was probably mythicized.
If he wrote it, he would know that 1 day and 40 days aren't the same thing, and also time compression's not a real fucking thing.
You literally are saying.
Can I interject real quick?
Yes, you can, but you're literally using time compression as an excuse. Literally, like you said that.
New Testament scholars, they look at these different literary devices.
But the Big Bang's
Let
improbable.
GE speak.
Go ahead, G.
Yeah.
Okay, so Master Supreme Apologist.
Again, it's supreme.
Master Bader something supreme. Galactic Overlord. Okay.
Listen, y'all don't have to be dicks. I told y'all earlier it was Apologist Supreme.
No, we do.
Okay, sorry. Apologize. I really wasn't trying to be like disrespectful or anything. I'm sorry.
Gee, he's
bad
called
with
John
names
90 and 0.
Everything in general.
Call him Josh.
Guys. Let him.
You can call me Josh if you want.
Okay. Well, Josh, can you tell me, for you, in your view, when was Luke Acts written?
Probably, I would do the more conservative viewpoint, probably in 62 AD, and other scholars have said this too. Oh, okay.
Well, you're wrong. It was written probably closer to 90 AD. So you have to take into account that this is supposedly Jesus died in between 30 and 33. This is 90. This is 60 years later. And it's supposed you're thinking that it's like a first-hand account or maybe even a second-hand account of what supposedly happened. Josh, but you have to understand that this is written 30 years after Paul supposedly lived, or was supposedly writing. And so I guess I just don't, I'm not buying this whole idea that Luke Acts can give us any kind of indication of actual history instead of just theology.
Let me
Josh, can I defend you for 1 second before we jump on? I just want to defend
but
Josh
I want to go after this. I want to go to GE. What GE?
Yeah, that's cool. But I just wanted to defend him. So the time compression he was talking about was not physical time compression. What he was talking about was a literary device whereby, where in certain stories, let's take Game of Thrones, for example. In the last season, all of a sudden the dragons are flying from one end of the island to the other in 15 minutes because they're wrapping up the season. We need the story. So we don't want to tell the story of them flying all the way. Whereas in season 1, they would take 5 episodes to walk from one place to the other. Josh is talking about a literary device, not an actual physical compression of time in what we would consider.
Thank you.
Is that appropriate, Josh?
Yes, thank you again.
Sure.
That's a little disheartening.
Kind of a huge distinction to be made there, don't you think, though, Josh?
Well, I thought y'all would, be generous in your understanding that I was speaking that way.
I would have never heard that if Paul hadn't.
Josh, you gotta make that clear because, yeah.
Okay,
but I didn't know what I mean. So let's just be kind to him because he does have some basis for what he's saying on something.
Let me say something else to make clear. History is different than the verifiable sciences or something you do in a lab. It's something that works according to something called abduction, where it's the inference to the best explanation. And the criteria of embarrassment, one thing that I mentioned, I'm not going to go over that, of course, but that's one thing. That's also what other, Christian apologists like inspiring philosophy. That's one thing he mentioned too. Major New Testament scholars understand these things. Now I want to go to GE. What GE said. Okay, GE, you said that even if, or you said if Acts was dated to 90, it shows that there's not a historical core. Well, the Acts passage of Jesus of Paul's appearance, of Jesus' appearance to Paul, that's in one of them is in Acts 13, 28 through 31. Okay, chapter 13, verse 28 through 31. It corresponds to 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 5, and it also corresponds to Mark 13 or Mark chapter 15, verse 37 to chapter 16, verse 7. So there you can see a pattern, and that's just where Christ died. You can also do it where Christ was buried. You can see the correspondence again in Acts and in Mark. And then when he was raised, you can see it again in Acts and Mark. And then when he appeared, you can see it again in Acts and Mark. So they're patterning them itself on an oral and written tradition, probably because many of the eyewitnesses and the contemporaries of the eyewitnesses were still alive and could safeguard this tradition.
The books.
If I could respond real quick.
Yeah, GE.
So all I have to say is that fan fiction comports with whatever kind of fiction that it, draws off of. I mean, that's basically what you're saying. Being that Luke Acts was written near the end of the century, and both Paul and Mark were writing. Well, Paul was writing in the 50s. Mark was written in the 70s. So, I mean, you're just basically saying that he used that information in order to generate his narrative.
You don't know that Mark was written that late. And
it doesn't actually matter.
Hands on Mark.
It only matters the sequence. So let's set the dating aside because I don't know we're agreeing on dating, but I think you would agree that Mark copies verse for verse a significant or Luke, pardon me, copies significant portions of Mark word for word. Yes. And so therefore for them to pretend that when he wrote Acts he didn't also have Mark as a source would be a little weird.
And Matthew does also, but
yeah. So to try and pretend they're different sources is a weird thing when he copies word for word.
Oh, but if you're going to use that argument, you're also going to have to say that there's stuff in Matthew and Luke that's not also in Mark. So you have the Q, you have L, and you have M. That's unique to both Matthew and Luke. So you're getting into a number of different sources. In the beginning of Luke, he even says.
But that's all. That's all hypothetical. Your argument was specifically trying to say that Mark. No, but you were trying to say that Mark and Acts, where they were agreeing, were different sources. We can talk about where they disagree and maybe agree that they were different sources. But you were specifically citing, and keep in mind, I just defended you 5 minutes earlier. Right. You were specifically trying to say where they agree and excited about that. And
okay, let me. Okay, you can throw Mark out, but what about the
I'm not throwing Mark out. You were trying to be excited that Mark and Acts were agreeing, but you've already acknowledged that
What about Acts and the 1 Corinthians 15 creed? They're parallel.
I don't think those agree at all. Now, I think that's going to be boring for the audience.
Well, the whole point is that they're all the people who the people who wrote these all more than likely had read the ones before it. Like, the point is that if you're copying from someone's work, then therefore your source is not all that different. What we would look for is something outside of that. We don't like, if you're looking at, let's take this out of context and let's say we're talking about World War II. We wouldn't just look at stories from the Allies side. You have to look at stories from the Axis side. You have to look at stories from people who aren't involved, people who are civilians, and from the war, and from everything else. You have to look at everything. And because we do not have that complete picture, we do not have a complete picture of it all. So
where's the tomb?
To say that the different sources and to just say, therefore we can prove that the resurrection happened, I think is wrong.
Okay, well, the resurrection is used as a cumulative case. It's not just used. I'm not trying to argue all these things. I like to in some of my
cumulative
debates,
of what though?
Well, let me finish my thought. In some of my debates, how I try to argue for Christianity, and I told this to Dr. Oppie, is as a chainmail, something a medieval knight would have on him, that the links hold all the links are like pieces of evidence, and they hold the whole cumulative case together. So if you knock off one link, and I told this to Dr. Oppie, then we're arguing from a cumulative case. And I even looked at his book, Arguing Against Gods.
All fair and fine, but what the links that you're talking about? What are the links in? Tell me the links that make up the chain that is the resurrection happened.
Well, I would say the resurrection is
thing. What is it cumulatively made of? Like, give me the points that all together.
Okay. You're saying if Christianity is true, what would we expect?
No. I'm asking you. You said that the case is it's a cumulative case, that the resurrection is true.
No, I say it for the truth of Christianity.
Okay. Okay, fine. Let's go with that. What are the cumulative pieces that make Christianity true?
Now, the resurrection is a significant one, so I'm not going to squibble on that. So I would say the empty tomb,
for fuck's sake,
more plausibly, plausibly true that it was empty rather than it was occupied. The appearances tradition, and the very origin of the Christian faith, where it went against a lot of their expectations. Now, GE, you mentioned earlier about the reverse expectations. What you're referencing is Richard Carrier's book, if I'm not mistaken.
No, wait. Before you go down that road, hold on. Before you get down that road, you mentioned three things. You mentioned the empty tomb, which
and the burial.
We've already crushed the empty tomb part. So there's one chink off of your armor. Now, the second one was what?
We've discussed
the witnesses. The witnesses.
Let me go back. I forgot to say
Josh,
that burial.
Our whole point is that all your sources are from one perspective. We don't have sources from another perspective confirming this and using a synthesis. Like you're trying to say that it's a synthesis argument, and I'm trying to say that we don't have enough sources for it to be a synthesis argument.
Okay, let's look at this 1 Corinthians 15 creed. The burial is attested there, so it goes back to within.
But that's not Kyle's question.
You're saying the burial's not attested?
No, it says buried, which is a mass. Which you already told me normally was a mass grave. So the empty tomb is not part of it.
No, that normally it was a mass grave, but you're not looking at the specific evidence of Joseph of Arimathea. As a historian, you have to look at both.
It's in the book.
Are these part of the chains you're trying to tell Kyle? Because I'd love for Kyle to get his answer.
Please. I'm sorry. What were you saying? What's the?
Give me the links in the armor. The
burial is the first one, Kyle.
The burial.
Yes, the honorable burial by Joseph of Arimathea.
Now, stop right there. What do you have to prove that?
that it's historically trustworthy.
How do you?
You have
how,
census
how can
records
you
for
say-
Joseph.
How can you say?
Let him go, King. Let him go, King.
It's unlikely
sorry.
to be a Christian invention, for one.
Unlikely?
Since Joseph,
Okay, there's a
unlikely.
troublesome word there. Unlikely.
Well,
Okay.
but we're dealing with history again, remember?
Sure.
Not
I'll
the
grant you that.
laboratory assignments.
Yeah. I'll grant you that. Go ahead.
Okay. Paul uses that. It's
Wait, where does Paul use it? Where does Paul
Yeah,
mention
Paul-
Joseph
in
Arimathea?
the 1 Corinthians 15 creed.
Oh, but he doesn't mention Joseph Arimathea though, right?
Oh, no. He mentions just that he was buried.
Okay, so that's ambiguous, right? That's as ambiguous.
Why
as it gets.
would, okay, again, the criteria of embarrassment. Why would they
Right.
invoke Joseph of Arimathea in all 4 Gospels?
No, but we're just. I'm trying to tell you that 1 Corinthians
when
15.
you're making up a story,
But 1 Corinthians
Paul,
15 is ambiguous, right?
You just said it.
Is as ambiguous as it can be.
Paul, he just said it. When you're making up a
correct.
story.
Right.
when you're no, if you were making up a story, surely you would not say the person who was in charge of burying Jesus was a member of the very court that condemned Jesus.
Well,
that
sure.
seems
what I'm trying to
count
ask-
You
in the
can't make that
burial
influence
favor.
because you weren't there. It's conjecture.
Oh,
Well, also,
come
you're
on.
you're trying to make it seem like you're trying to strawman us and make it seem like we were trying to say that it was all just some cabal that people were like, ooh, let's have a fun joke by making up the story in the Bible. I think it's safe to say that we actually believe that the people who wrote this stuff actually believed this, but the whole point is that we don't have a whole lot of evidence to say it was actually true. You can believe something and have it
There's
not
no
be
evidence.
true. It happens all the
Not a
time.
whole lot. There's none.
If I can interject real quick, Josh, it still doesn't make sense even on your reasoning, because if you actually read the Gospels, then you would know that it talks about how Joseph of Arimathea was actually a Christian. So I feel like this is more of a plot device rather than.
It says that in one gospel, right?
No. It says it in all 4 Gospels that he was.
It says he's a Christian.
Yes.
It says in one gospel, I believe.
I think
No.
it's inferred in one of them, but it's outright said in more than one.
Okay, yeah, but okay, all right. So I don't think that discounts the historical accuracy of Joseph
yes, it does.
Arimathea. Especially,
Well,
here's another
no.
argument. Here's another argument for it. Arimathea has no theological significance. So all these little arguments together raise the probability of it being historically authentic.
Well, I mean, the whole point,
Okay.
like, do you have any other outside sources outside of the Bible, outside of this community that say
You're-
Joseph of
you-
Arimathea existed? Do we know that Pontius Pilate existed, for instance, outside of the
You're-
Bible, because we have other sources that mention him, and we have all kinds of other things we can verify that
That's
Pilate
an
existed.
arbitrary high standard to meet.
No, it's not. It's a very easy standard.
But
Literally,
it's
we
just
found a
talking
column
about
in
the
desert.
burial. It's talking about the burial. It's not saying Jesus was therefore resurrected. The burial, it's not saying that a miracle happened then, only that he was buried. And by Joseph of Arimathea being recorded in all 4 Gospels,
I'm at a
surely
loss.
that counts in favor of the historicity.
I'm at a loss here.
Okay. Can I?
Of one source.
Let me add some perspective to that particular statement of the fact that Joseph of Arimathea is multiply attested, which is what Josh is talking about here. Now, Mark was the first gospel written. Joseph of Arimathea appears there, so that's one source. Matthew copies from Mark.
What about the Q source?
Hold on. You have no evidence for Q. Okay, you cannot actually point to Q. Q is a hypothetical kind of source, and I don't even think that the Q source actually exists. So let's just go with stuff that we have physically, right? Like we have physical copies of all 4 Gospels, correct?
They're copies, like Bart Ehrman would say, they're copies of copies of copies. But that, and still in history, we can infer what happened based on the testimonial evidence that we do have.
Not to a high probability, though.
Can I finish my argument?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have one gospel, Mark. Next gospel is Matthew. Matthew directly copies from Mark, so that's not independent. Luke copies directly from Matthew and Mark. That's not independent. John was written near the end of the first century, if not very beginning of the second century. That's not independent. So you quickly go from 4 quote-unquote independent attestations of this Joseph of Arimathea to really just one. Just one source, and that's Mark, who wrote his gospel for theological purposes and only references the scriptures for things. And to say that Joseph of Arimathea serves no theological purpose, I think that convincing part of the Sanhedrin to become a Christian, to side with the person that they were executing as not being part of, or part God or is God or whatever.
If that's false,
I think that's a really big assumption on your part that there's no theological purpose to that.
If that's false, well, hold on. That would give the opponents the chance to rebut that. If they're naming a person, and if it goes back to Mark in the pre-Markian tradition. Now, let me go back to your sources. Matthew did copy Mark, but there's stuff in Matthew that's not in Mark.
Yeah, but Josh, it's the same thing I just told you 5 minutes ago. We're talking about things where they agree. So the fact that there might be accused, I mean,
there's more sources.
But it doesn't matter. No, but we're talking about the places we are talking. Joseph of Arimathea is one of those places where they agree. So you keep bringing up Q sources for other places while we're talking about Joseph of Arimathea is a great non sequitur.
Okay.
We're talking about the places where they agree.
It's unlikely that all 4 gospels would include Joseph of Arimathea, especially when Arimathea had no theological significance, and it gave the opponents of early Christianity a chance to be rebutted.
Josh, do you agree that the Matthew and Luke accounts of the burial are nearly word for word Mark's accounts of the Joseph of Arimathea, just the Joseph of Arimathea section?
Oh, well, why should we think it's untrustworthy by them?
But Josh, you're trying to. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. You're talking about multiple sources for Joseph of Arimathea. We know that Matthew, Mark, and Luke, those specific verses are nearly identical.
I see what you're saying, Paul. Yeah, even if we have these 4 sources, 4 different authors, they're still thinking that Joseph of Arimathea is a trustworthy source. So that's prima facie credibility for historical trustworthiness.
Okay, but you've just acknowledged then.
Arimathea.
Right. So, but all I'm saying is you've just agreed with me that there's one source for Joseph of Arimathea, even though they all agreed that, oh yeah, this is a good one, and we're all going to copy it over word for word. There isn't. You can't say that Joseph of Arimathea is multiply attested.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's inconclusive. But
okay.
Well, you got to provide the sources for that.
So, but
hold on. If all 4 gospels are using different sources and they include Joseph of Arimathea, and Arimathea had no theological significance, et cetera, the prima facie probability, it's on the burden of the skeptic to say that it's not historical.
No, but we're not talking about whether it's historical. We're addressing your specific claim that it's multiply attested, and you agreed with me that the verses in which Joseph of Arimathea are written are virtually identical, and that you agree that those specific verses are copied from Mark. So the fact that 19 other things or 100,000 other things vary.
Okay, I could agree on that, and I don't see why the cumulative case, what I've been saying, is that's a good argument for why we shouldn't trust the historical
it's because I guess people like GE and myself and everyone in here, when you say it's a cumulative case, we don't look at the cumulative before we look at each individual link in the chain. And I'm sorry that you don't like that we look so scrutinizingly at each individual link in the chain, but that's the only way you can actually, for someone like myself, can be confident in the general case.
It seems like it's almost a hyper skepticism at this point.
Okay, but Josh, that's okay, because if you're saying that your standards of evidence are different than our standards of evidence, then that's fine.
Also, okay, let me go to Michael Grant, a secular historian. Let me just read. This is real fast. Quote: "The historian cannot justifiably deny the empty tomb." Actually, that was on the empty tomb. I was thinking because I was going to use that for the empty tomb. I'm sorry.
Until you provide one, though, I think we can. I think it's well within our.
I think the biggest thing is that,
yeah.
The biggest thing is that we're like Paul said, just the
I didn't finish.
Standards of evidence are a little bit higher than yours, just because, you know, as history as a whole, like if I'm looking at something like the Suez crisis or like the Suez crisis, I'm not going to just look at one source or even just one group of sources that come from one context. I want to get the whole picture of what happened, I got to look at the entirety of the sources. And what we're saying is you're basing this belief off of one tiny group.
Let's go back to
not even a group of sources.
Let's go back to the Suez Canal. Are you talking? I'm a history teacher. Are you talking about the Suez Canal, right?
I'm talking about the Suez Crisis of '57.
This is more painful than the first time I tried anal.
Okay.
This entire conversation.
You're going.
Are we heading somewhere, or do we need to wrap it up?
Dude, I don't even know where we're at right now. I'm so tuned out. I'm listening.
I want to see what he says.
I'm fascinated when Paul speaks. When Paul speaks, I actually listen. I'm going, okay, this is interesting. The rest of you, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, to be honest with you. It's so incoherent to me. I'm sorry, Josh. I don't know what the hell you're trying to argue half the time. And then we had, obviously, you know, atheist, whatever, Hunter in here. I couldn't get any of that. So I can listen to Paul speak on this for ages. Even G makes some valid points that I can listen to. But the rest of you, I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
It's just garble. It's just worse.
It's gobbledygook.
You're just saying things to say.
And I'm the neutral kind of guy, right? I give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't say that what you're saying is bullshit, but it just sounds like bullshit to me.
I'm sorry, Kyle. When I was bringing up the Suez Canal, you said something derogatory, right?
I did.
Why would you say that? That's kind of being a dick, right?
No, I am somebody that doesn't think that is something derogatory. I happen to quite be a fan of that.
Okay, I stand corrected. I stand corrected.
So given where we're at, I would love to, if we want to start moving to wrap it up, I would love to hear Nathaniel's thoughts about how the debate went.
And Nathaniel too. I didn't mean to dismiss.
We didn't get to miracles and probability.
No, but I think we're closing down soon. So
yeah, we got to wrap it up.
Nathaniel, how did the debate go? Like, what do you think?
All right, Nathaniel, take us, man. And I didn't mean to exclude you either, Nathaniel. You know and I. Go ahead.
And be careful how you refer to me.
Yes.
I just won't refer to you then.
Might be challenged to a debate.
I brought up, and to say this because it actually pertains to the debate, I actually brought up the Joseph of Arimathea thing because it pertains directly to the resurrection. If there's no Joseph of Arimathea, there is no tomb. And I felt, and I mentioned that to Dean a couple of times, and we did not ever necessarily go into it very much. I felt, and Dean and I have messaged back and forth a little bit here. He said thank you to all of you guys, as well as he said thank you for being a friend. And so we're the Golden Girls now. I thought that it went about as I thought it would. I can tell you, Paul, a week ago, maybe a little over a week ago, I was talking to my girlfriend, Susan, and I mentioned to her, I said, I think I want to talk about the disciples. And I want to kind of mention that we don't know what happened to them. And not even like a couple of hours later, I looked over at her from the computer and I said, Paulogia uploaded a stupid video about it. That's a thing that happened. And I was like, okay, well, make sure that this stuff matches. But it went almost exactly as I thought it would. I made the prediction that he was going to use, that Dean was going to use the minimal facts with Habermas and Lacona and William Lane Craig. And that was correct, which is also why I did not even address them for the most part, because I feel as though there are better arguments that possibly can be made. I felt like Dean avoided a lot of the things that I said. And whether that's fair or not, I suppose I'd have to go back and listen to it again. And I rarely listen to my own things. I have other people that tell me how poorly I did or how well I did. There were a lot of things we didn't get to, but it's such a large topic, isn't it? There's so much.
Can I weigh on that for a second, Nathaniel? Because that's my criticism. My only really criticism is that it's such a large topic that if we ever do these again, can we focus on one specific thing, one fact, minimal fact? I mean, when Dean came in, he just ran the narrative verbatim, something we've all heard before a million times. I see no use for that. If you want to dive into the details, maybe, because I know you're scholarly enough to do so, have them pick one specific point that they want to talk for extensively. I'd be much more interested in that than this gish galloping shotgun effect that I see every single time this discussion happens to come up. I think you would enjoy that more too, actually.
Which is one of the reasons I like to concede. Every debate I've done on this, I always concede the crucifixion, even though, like, personally, I might not in my real life, but it's just like, why are we wasting a single second of the debate talking about whether Jesus died? Because, like, who cares? He died.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Because no New Testament scholars deny the crucifixion.
Right.
Well, yeah,
I'll take that debate.
Well, yeah, I know there is a debate to be had. There is a debate to be had, but I feel like in this context, it's kind of like, oh, can we at least put one of these aside?
If I was having a debate on resurrection, then I would definitely I would concede, like, oh, Jesus dying on the cross. Like, I can concede like points for the sake of a debate or discussion.
Right.
For the sake of argument.
And I put
let me ask a question. Not to be snotty, but what is y'all's opinion of the scholarship of Richard Carrier?
Non-sequitur. We don't need to, like, no, let's stick to the debate because we're trying to wrap up.
Yeah, literally. Maybe, I mean, we can get into another time. I like Richard. I disagree with him a few things. He's a friend of mine. I consider him actually a personal friend because we have a lot of conversations with each other. But we don't have to agree on everything. And even he will admit that he just argues that his Bayesian analysis is about 2/3. But he's a hell of a nice guy. I mean, granted, he could be a little bit frustrating sometimes. People say that about me, so I mean, I guess
that's not sequitur. Let's not get into what our personal. That has nothing to do with anything, Josh.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked.
But I just don't. I agree with Kyle. I just don't think it really need to get into that, Josh.
Richard Carrier's great.
Yeah, he's a really decent guy.
I don't know about your audience, but either me or Andrew, I think we would love to debate some of your best guys. And
you,
Josh, we know you want to debate everyone on everything. Like, that's something that we just know.
No,
so
you can't.
We're just tuck that away and assume.
Yeah,
you're up for it.
There's things I won't debate, but things that I'm confident about, I certainly want to debate that. And Paul, I want to say, I think all of y'all are smart guys. That's why I'm here. That's why I want to talk with y'all. And whatever debate I'm going to be in with y'all, it's going to be respectful. And I give you my word. So
I'm going to sum up before you go, Paul. I just want to sum up tonight's this is what we learned tonight. Okay, so in the armor here, this is some chain link armor. See, the thought is that they're bonded quite strong, like as you see here. They're nice diamond formed, just well put together. However, Josh, I hope that the takeaway from this is that your
crappy piece of art,
your reality looks more like this.
Yeah,
it's chain links that are busted, unraveling, and burning up in all kind of fire down here.
Yeah, I think you're trying to convince yourself of that.
No. Hear me out.
No, we're all in agreement on this.
No, hear me out. That was a very good example that you actually, that's the one thing that you said tonight that was, I think, dead on. And that is that arguments and cases that you make for things, and sort of the argument that you lay out is sort of made up like a chain link. They are links that you link together, and the better the links and the stronger the links, the stronger the entire chain is as a whole. You see what I'm saying? There's just a really good visual with that. Your links that you were bringing up tonight have obvious weak points. Some of the links just crumble under the scrutiny, and you can sort of, I guess, bend yourself and your mind into all kind of mental gymnastics if you want to, and try to explain it off in all of these sort of fantastical ways. I mean, I totally get why you have to do that as a Christian, but
oh, come on.
I'm serious. You might want to take a step back and just think about the like what was said here tonight. And I'm not being facetious in any way. Take a step back and watch this again and look and really think about what you're calling proofs and what you're calling facts. Are they that? Can you honestly say that they are facts? If this was about something completely different,
the only
would you be
thing
saying the same thing? I don't think that you would. I think that you have to say that because obviously you have to defend the faith, and I get that. But
not at all. The only thing I have to show is that these facts are more plausible than their negation. So even if they're not.
Well, you're not thinking honestly about it then.
Well, hold on. That's what a historian does when we're talking about facts. I don't have to give certainty, just plausibility, more than 50%.
Okay, this is why you're 490 and 0. How dare I? Yes, go ahead.
419.
Yeah, I have actually for my wrap up, and thank you to everybody that provided some great feedback there. I actually have a wrap up question, and it's Apologist Supremo. It's a yes or no, or you know what I mean. It's not. I don't need a fucking drawn out dissertation. Yeah. Is it more likely, because you know how we do historiography and things like this, right? Is it more likely that some people had hallucinations and said they saw things that they genuinely believed, or is it more likely that for the only time in the history of the fucking planet somebody came back to life?
You have to y'all want me to step back. You have to step back and look at the overall evidence. You can't judge a historical event, the probability, by just looking at it in isolation of the whole historical context.
No,
surely you must know this.
This is what you're doing. You're doing it.
That was the question. I knew you weren't going to answer, but that was my wrap up question. Thank you.
Right, fair enough.
It was a shitty question. Sorry.
Make sure that make sure you subscribe to everybody here. Did everybody get a chance to say, Paul, did you have anything else that you wanted to?
You wrapped it up better than I was going to. So
yeah, I think.
Here's a question that we're going to end on, and I've been waiting all night to ask this question to Josh.
I didn't get a chance.
Oh, sorry, GE. Sorry. Please.
I'm still here.
I'm so sorry.
Did he sway you? Did he say sway you, GE? Are you convinced now?
No, I'm definitely not swayed by anything. What I mostly heard tonight was just appeals to authority and indirect answers to questions and no real direct answers to things. I would actually love to see actual evidence and not just, this historian says this or this historian says that. And then the evidence that's not easily debunked, something that's really got to make me think. And I just really didn't run into any of that tonight. I honestly hope for more of these type of debates in the future, despite what Steve feels about them.
I just want them to be a little bit more variety and more in-depth stuff. I mean, I think, you're right about what I hear from Josh and the rest of them. All I literally hear is, I'm just going to argue what these people have said that I've read, right? This literally 99% of every argument I've heard on this particular topic is I'm going to just regurgitate what I've heard from other people. I don't really see a lot of individual argumentations from specific people going, you know what, here's my approach to these things. And that's, Josh, I'm specifically talking to you on this. You have no real individualized argumentation on any of this. It seems you're just saying, well, these people say this, and I'm going to parrot these other.
Well,
people.
I do have a unique approach, and I used it against Dr. Graham Oppy is way smarter than me in philosophy, but I used something in philosophy that he wasn't familiar with, and I want to bring that up right now. And that is when we discussed David Hume. Well, when David Hume was alive, Thomas Reid and the Common Sense Realists from Scotland, they really debunked this. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence stuff.
Let me ask you a question, Josh. If God came to you and said that he was going to give you the opportunity to exchange your place in heaven for a soul that would originally be damned to hell for all of eternity, would you take that trade?
Would I rather?
Would you do as Jesus did? And
would you emulate the
someone's
sacrifice?
place?
Yeah. Would you emulate Jesus as the ultimate sacrifice and say, you know what, Godless engineer, I'm going to let you into heaven and I'm going to take your place in hell? If God would allow you to do that,
would you do
or
that?
anybody?
He doesn't want.
Would I do what Jesus did?
Yeah, that's the emulate. Jesus says command to be like him, right? I mean, that would be the ultimate
Be Christ-like.
in his footsteps, would it not?
Would you take somebody's place in hell?
Is this really an argument?
Yes.
It's a question.
It's a question.
Okay. No, because I think the greatest good is to worship God and to follow him.
Of course you do.
That's why I want to talk to y'all, because
that's
y'all
not
are
really
great people, but you're on a one-way path to hell if you don't change.
Oh, fuck you.
Hang on. Hey, Josh, it's really, here's what I find to get
I don't
interested
believe in hell.
Yeah, I don't either. But here's the thing, Josh. You're literally saying, Josh, you're literally, this is what I'm hearing. I'm going to worship Christ. I'm going to follow in his footsteps. I want to be just like him, but I'm not going to do what he did. I'm not going to just sacrifice myself like he did, even though he commands me to be just like him.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Christian.
He wants us to not do that specific thing. I don't think.
Where did he mention this?
No, I specifically said he came to you and gave you the option. He came to you and said, "Will you take this? Will you take this poor sinner's place?"
So, hey, can I explain this real quick?
Sure.
I think that's the worst argument in the history.
It's a question. It's not an argument.
Okay.
Do you not know the difference between a question and an argument?
I'm trying.
Okay, here,
the truth
I
is,
can answer this really quick.
All right, go ahead, G, because he's not getting.
All right. So the whole deal with Jesus sacrificing himself is that it's blood magic. The only thing that I can figure is that Josh's blood isn't magical enough to actually redeem anything.
That's true.
So
my nature is sinful, and indeed all of our nature.
You just don't want to burn. Don't give me this. I'm destined to.
Weren't we heading out?
You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Good night.
It's midnight, Josh. Let's stop talking.
All right. Peace out, brothers and sisters.
I just want to know.
One last time. So you wouldn't do what Christ commanded?
No, he wouldn't.
Follow his footsteps. Is that true?
He's commanded me in Matthew to go preach the gospel.
Good night.
But not sacrifice yourself. There you go.
There you go.
Father and Son,
All right.
Holy
Peace out,
Spirit.
guys.
And Christ is risen.
All right. We're stopped.
All right. I really wish, Nathaniel, I want